What if the scariest stories aren't made up, but lived? Tonight, I'm diving into the truly chilling. 3 horror stories sent in by you, my amazing subscribers. These aren't just tales. They read confessions of real-life terror that might make you think twice about what lurks in the shadows of your own life. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what you see in the dark. It's what whispers your name when you know you're alone. I was 22 when this happened, traveling across the state for a job interview. It was a long drive, and I had no family nearby, so I booked the cheapest motel I could find off the highway. It was one of those one-story, U-shaped motels with peeling paint and buzzing fluorescent lights that seemed to hum louder than the crickets in the fields around it. When I checked in, the man at the front desk barely looked at me. He just slid the key across the counter and muttered, "End of the row." I remember thinking how strange it was that there were no other cars in the lot. Every door I passed was shut tight, curtains drawn, not a single sound. My room smelled faintly of mildew and old cigarettes. Carpet was stiff, the bedsheets scratchy, but I was too tired to care. I turned on the TV just for some background noise and started scrolling through my phone before finally setting it down and switching off the lamp. That's when I heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought it was the TV, but I had shut it off. Then I wondered if the sound was coming from the thin wall behind the headboard, maybe another guest in the next room. But I remembered walking past earlier. The room beside mine had its curtains wide open, and it was empty. The whisper came again, clearer this time. It was my name, Eli. I froze, staring up at the ceiling, my chest tightening. My brain was scrambling to explain it away. Maybe I was half asleep. Maybe it was just the wind through the cracks in the old window frame. But then it came again, louder, closer. Eli. The voice was coming from inside the room. I sat up, every hair on my arm standing straight. The air felt wrong, heavy, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. My first instinct was to grab my phone and shine the flashlight, but I didn't want to move. I just sat there, holding my breath, straining to hear. The whisper changed. It wasn't just my name anymore. Don't look. My hand shot out and clicked the lamp on. The room flooded with the sickly yellow glow, and I spun my head in every direction. The bathroom door was closed, the curtains were still drawn, and nothing seemed out of place. And then, without warning, the bathroom door creaked. Slowly, opening. I stared at it. The light buzzing above me, and my body locked in place. I couldn't see inside, just a strip of pitch black. My legs felt like stone, but something primal in me screamed to move. I grabbed my phone, shoved it in my pocket, and bolted out the door. The night air slapped me in the face, humid and thick. I didn't stop running until I was at the front office, pounding on the glass like a maniac. The same desk clerk shuffled out from the back, eyes half closed like I'd just woken him from a nap. "There's someone in my room," I stammered. He blinked at me, rubbed his face, and said in the flattest tone, "There's no one checked into that room but you." I wanted him to follow me, to see what I'd heard, but the way he said it chilled me more than anything, like he knew, like it wasn't the first time. I didn't go back for my things. I drove away that night, headlights cutting through the empty road, not stopping until the motel was miles behind me. To this day, I have no idea what whispered my name. But sometimes, late at night, when I turn off my bedroom light, I swear I hear it again, soft, right behind me, Eli. The silence that followed the first outbreaks of the plague was heavier than thunder. At first, people whispered about strange deaths in far-off towns, dismissing them as exaggerations or rumors. But rumors grew into truth, and truth became terror. Caravans arriving from the east carried not only spices, silks, and promises of fortune, but also something invisible. Something clinging to the fur of rats and the bodies of fleas. The plague was not bound by walls or borders, traveled faster than armies, slipped through guarded gates and seeped into homes like a black mist. Merchants who once brought wealth to bustling cities now brought death. A single wagon rolling through a marketplace could unleash a nightmare. One cough, one handshake, one flea bite was enough to ignite a chain of infection that consumed entire families. Within days, a neighborhood could fall silent, its windows shuttered, its streets littered with abandoned belongings and the stench of decay. Villages that had once echoed with laughter and prayer became hollow shells of despair. Farmers fled their fields. And in towns, bells tolled endlessly, announcing yet another soul taken by the invisible hand of the plague. But it was not only the living who were feared, it was the dead themselves. Corpses piled in homes when there were no survivors left to bury them. At first, the churchyards tried to keep up, digging fresh graves for the flood of bodies. But soon, the earth was overwhelmed. Graves overflowed, and the soil could no longer swallow the dead fast enough. Mass pits were dug, wide and deep and filled with layer upon layer of the departed. The survivors watched, horrified, as carts laden with corpses rattled through the streets, their drivers covering their mouths with scraps of cloth soaked in vinegar, desperate to avoid breathing the same cursed air. Children, once playful and curious, now shrank from the sound of those wheels, knowing it meant neighbors or family were gone forever. The fear spread even faster than the disease. People distrusted one another. A neighbor's cough was no longer a small annoyance, but a death sentence. Families locked their doors, refusing to open them even for relatives. Mothers abandoned sick children, husbands fled from wives. The plague did not only rot the body, it corroded the bonds of humanity itself. In the countryside, some communities turned to desperate measures. Entire villages barricaded themselves, posting armed guards at the edges of roads, threatening travelers with death if they approached. Fires were lit in an attempt to purify the air. Herbs, incense, and pungent smoke filled the skies, believed to drive out the poison carried by invisible demons. But no wall, no prayer, no fire could stop the advancing shadow. The plague did not discriminate. It struck kings in their castles and beggars in the streets. In Venice, the wealthiest merchantmen who owned fleets of ships and fortunes of gold died, gasping beside their servants. In Paris, students of philosophy and law abandoned their studies as their classrooms emptied. In London, even the priests who ministered to the dying soon followed their flock into the grave. The sheer scale of death defied comprehension. Some chroniclers wrote that half of all Europe's population vanished within a few years. Streets once filled with the cries of vendors and the bustle of markets now stood eerily quiet, broken only by the moans of the sick or the wheels of corpse wagons grinding over cobblestones. And yet amidst the horror, there were those who sought to profit. Gravediggers demanded outrageous fees, knowing families had no choice but to pay. Apothecaries sold charms, powders, and potions with promises of protection, though none held any power against the plague's invisible claws. Charlatans roamed from town to town, offering false cures for coin, leaving despair in their wake. But perhaps the most haunting change was in the way the living began to see life itself. When death became an ever-present companion, many abandoned morality altogether. Some people cloistered themselves in isolated homes, living in silence and fear. Others chose to plunge into reckless indulgence, drinking, gambling, and surrendering to desires, believing tomorrow was no longer promised. The world had become unrecognizable, a place where trust had withered, faith trembled, and death reigned without mercy. The Black Death was not merely a disease. It was a storm of fear, suspicion, and chaos that reshaped society at its core. It broke kingdoms, shattered faith, and forced mankind to confront its own fragility in the face of nature's wrath. The forest swallowed me whole. By the time I had pitched my small tent near the edge of the clearing, darkness had already begun to bleed between the trees. The sun didn't simply set. Here it seemed to sink away, smothered by the canopy, leaving behind only a suffocating blackness. That first night was supposed to be a test. I had told myself that nothing would happen. Is that all those stories, the whispers about figures in the woods? It's about eyes reflecting in the dark where no animal should be? Were only legends told to scare children? I was wrong. At first, it was the silence that unsettled me. You don't realize how much noise civilization makes until you step away from it. No humming of electricity, no distant engines, no human voices, only the deep, unsettling absence of sound. Even the crickets and the owls seemed muted, as if they, too, were afraid to be heard. Lying inside my thin tent, wrapped in a sleeping bag, I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my chest. The fabric walls felt like paper, incapable of keeping anything out. Every creak of a branch overhead sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind against the nylon felt like something brushing past me. I tried to close my eyes, but then it started. At first, it was faint like a branch shifting in the breeze and tapping gently against the tent. But the rhythm was too deliberate. 3 soft taps, a pause, 3 taps again. My throat went dry. I held my breath, straining to listen, praying it was just my imagination. Then came the sound that shattered any hope of that. Breathing. Slow, heavy, unmistakably human breathing. Right outside my tent. I didn't move. Didn't make a sound. I thought maybe if, I stayed completely still, whoever or whatever was out there would go away. But the breathing only grew closer, heavier, as if the presence was crouching down just inches from my head. The fabric of the tent trembled. A shadow passed across it. Then a voice, barely a whisper. 99 nights. I froze. My stomach dropped as if I were falling through the earth itself. I hadn't told anyone how long I planned to stay. Nobody should have known. The voice was soft, childlike, but wrong. Like someone mimicking the innocence of a child but failing to mask the distortion beneath. I wanted to scream, to unzip the tent and run, but my body betrayed me. I was paralyzed, pinned to the ground by fear. The whisper faded, and after a long silence, the breathing stopped. I lay there in darkness, every nerve in my body, waiting for the sound of the zipper tearing open. But it never came. Instead, I heard footsteps retreating into the trees. Slow, dragging steps, like bare feet against dirt. Eventually, exhaustion overpowered fear, and I must have drifted into a shallow, restless sleep. But even then, the forest did not release me. I dreamed of eyes wide, glassy eyes like those of a deer, unblinking and wet, reflecting a light that wasn't there. They hovered in the shadows, watching me. Always watching. When I woke at dawn, my body stiff and aching, I almost convinced myself it had been a nightmare. That is, until I stepped outside the tent. The earth was disturbed. Footprints circled my camp in wide loops, bare feet, narrow with long, dragging toes that dug lines into the soil. And at the base of my tent, pressed gently into the nylon as if by a finger, was a single mark. Perfect circle. Beneath it, in the dirt, words were etched by hand.
98 nights.
I stood frozen, staring at the message, as the morning light filtered weakly through the trees. My breath caught in my throat, my chest tightening with panic. I had come here seeking solitude, seeking escape from the world. Instead, I had walked into a nightmare that was counting down. I wanted to leave right then. Pack up, run back to civilization, forget I had ever come here. But something in me wouldn't allow it. Pride, perhaps. Or maybe the same madness that drove me here in the first place. I told myself it was a prank, some cruel joke by a local who knew I was camping here. That explanation, fragile as it was, kept me rooted in place. But deep down, I already knew the truth. This wasn't human, and it wasn't going to let me go. The forest wasn't empty. It never had been. I still had 98 nights left to endure.